Hi, Leigh.
Hi, Fifi. Isn't life a parade?
Honestly, I'm tiptoeing through the tulips day by day. Just existence is a blessing and never a burden. Welcome, listeners. Welcome back to Queer Gals Watch the West Wing.
Welcome.
With your bestest gal pals, Fi and Leigh.
Hey.
She's here. She's ready to go.
Shall we drop in to the year 2000, Fi?
Yes, let's. And this week we are going to be covering season 2, episode 12, The Drop-In.
And I must say, it feels like a really classic West Wing episode, this one.
Yeah, we've got some pace, we've got some stakes. The title of this episode of The West Wing will become clear as we go through. It is an incredibly stressful concept, which in my mental state right now, I would not be able to handle.
And we are throwing it back to Lord John Marbury. We had a feeling he was coming back, and he is back in a big way. That's
right, people. Hold on to your hats, because Lord John returns in a way that was just so different to how I thought he was going to. And more on that later. Let's just get going straight into the episode recap. We'll touch on the previously on, which was the jump scare of Lord John Marbury back on our screens.
Hey, Queen.
He's firmly re-entered the chat.
Or should I say, hey, Queen's representative in the United States.
Very good. She's witty and she's gorgeous, you know? So our previously on is giving Lord John Marbury. It's also giving
Leo's like with main character energy. Also Lord John Marbury, it very much is giving the vibe that he's like coming back to like lead the revolution. I never expected him to be like our Che Guevara, yet here we are.
He is a rabble rouser though. Like he does be, rousing rabbles. Truly. About the West Wing. But we open in the sit room.
It is all action from moment one. And I have to say, Leo is on the edge. Mm-hmm. He is a stressed little puppy. And wow, I've got to say, a lot of old white guys in this room.
Yes, I saw one woman in this scene and she was just walking, carrying some paperwork as a background actor.
But also, where is Fitzwallace? He's been conspicuously absent from the last few visits to the Situation Room. And
I'm
frankly worried. If Fitzy goes to Mandyland, I'm going to stage a revolution.
Some sort of delayed protest.
Just 25 years after the airing of the show.
I will, if he goes to Mandyland, I will write a letter to Aaron Sorkin. And I will post it via snail mail to America, where I assume he lives. And I will be like, I'm disappointed. Anywho, what the reason why we're in the sit room is we're launching a rocket.
We are.
Which feels very male.
Yeah.
I'm not really into it. But we have 2 minutes before impact.
Yeah.
So we're off to find Jed because we want to involve Jed in the rocket thing.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in the Oval Office, Jed is just being like crazy with new ambassadors, having the time of his little life.
It's very kind of crackpots and these women in vibe.
Truly. Leigh, I would like you to perform a line of dialogue from Jed Bartlet.
Okay, well, golf's not a sport. It's fine, don't get me wrong, but let's not, you and I, confuse it with things that men do.
I have no feedback for that line at all.
Jed just entering the episode with rogue energy. I've never loved him more.
Literally asking someone like what sports they enjoy and them saying golf and him being like, with respect, that's not a sport and I don't respect you anymore. Things that men do, though, very much sums up golf for me. Golf, for me personally, is a true and unimpeachable ick.
Yeah.
I think it's vile. I don't like the clothes they wear. I don't like the attitude. Someone pointed out that in no other sport but golf do people turn up like ready to be like tapped in. Like as if like they're gonna be like, sorry, do you want to play as well? Just seeing a man carrying golf clubs dries me up, Leigh.
The only time that I've ever enjoyed golf was when Rory accompanied her grandfather Richard to the golf club in, I believe, season 1 or 2 of Gilmore Girls. And she wears a kind of adorable golfing outfit.
I think also, women's golf has done a lot for lesbians in sport. Let's not get this wrong.
Yes, a moment for Jordan Baker, lesbians and golf.
Truly. And don't get me wrong, I love a clubhouse. Love a clubhouse. Loving like a little boozy lunch. It's just something about men carrying golf clubs, Leigh, just locks me up like a clam. It's awful. Anyway.
Also, I must say though, when did Jed and Charlie become like a kind of comedy double act?
There's a lot of riffing between them. And we had a little bit with the like white tie event banter.
Yes.
But I think firmly this is a new era of their friendship.
Agreed.
So Jed is swearing in a new ambassador for Thailand.
Yes.
And there is some mention that they are going to take a trip to Bangkok.
Please, Lord, tell me we're going to get to see this. I want like a lads on tour moment.
For sure. And just from a fashion perspective, I feel like a little mensch about the Thai ambassador's wife.
In like a gorgeous, stunning, square-necked periwinkle skirt suit. The colour was just stunning on her and feels like a kind of breath of fresh air in a way that really feels like grounded and true to that character within the West Wing, in that she's in a kind of slightly brighter tone.
It's lovely. It's like that kind of like noughties, like crushed silk. And she's also rocking that pixie cut that everyone's mum got in like 2001 and then just has had since then. Yeah. Anyway, Leo arrives. He wants to pull Jed out of this ambassador's meeting and he is blocked by Mrs. Landingham. Cue a bizarre exchange between these two characters, which we haven't seen. We haven't seen much interaction between these two.
Also, like, is it just me or is it kind of subtly flirtatious from both sides?
Now, I would like to read it in that way. Part of me is like, I think it's like that he's like, you're an old crusty woman, which I hate. But I would prefer to read it as like, you're a handsome woman, Mrs. Landingham. You're an attractive woman.
She is a handsome woman, Fiona.
Yeah, of course. And like, she's powerful. And I feel like Leo likes powerful women. Hence the spy, the Russian spy that he clearly had the hot sore. In this interaction, Leigh, would you like to be Dolores Landingham or Leo McGarry?
I've always really enjoyed your Dolores. So I'm going to give Dolores to you.
Thank you.
What are you looking at?
You're testing that preposterous contraption again.
It's not preposterous. It's not a contraption, and mind your own damn business.
In my day, we knew how to protect ourselves.
Well, in your day, you could pretty much turn back the Indians with a Daniel Boone musket, couldn't you?
Ah, sarcasm. The grumpy man's wit.
Sharpen a pencil, would you? And to this, I would say, A, is that an expression? Because B, I love it. And C, obviously, the turning back the Indians comment with the Daniel Boone musket is horrifying.
Truly horrifying.
Truly horrifying. But that aside, what a truly cracking tete-a-tete.
It's so like sharp. Like it's very much the sort of like work banter you have with like your work wife or work husband. Is
Agreed.
What I'd say. And I just think if we were to expand on some lore surrounding Mrs. Landingham and Leo, I would say that Mrs. Landingham feels like she's been with Jed long term. Like she's been there since governor days. And I feel like when Leo was like, we're going to make a play for the presidency, let's get you a new member of staff, someone fresh.
Ooh.
And Jed was like, no, if it's not Dolores, then it's not me. Like, we're a package.
I love this. No notes. Yeah. Yes. Love it.
And then Leo's had to like grow to understand Dolores and learn why she's so valuable to Jed.
Oh my God, Fee, I'm obsessed.
It's just the sort of hot takes people come for on Quick House Watch The West Wing. It's just us making up deranged shit about fictional characters. Anyway, we're on the move to the sit room. Jed is on fire. He says, Leo, were you born at the age of 55? Which one I think is fresh as hell from someone who has essentially been an elderly man for all of his life. Because like, Jed's not hip, he's not down with the kids.
Seriously considering becoming a priest. I rest my case.
But he says this in response to Leo not being familiar with the Peanuts comics. Which again is like also just like a super lame thing to like get on his high horse about. He also in this interaction says the word butt, like as in like someone's backside, about 1,000 times. But he says it with so much like loose jowl movement. He's like butt that he falls on his butt. And I lost my shit, frankly, because I just thought it was the funniest thing that Martin Sheen's ever done. But we're testing a missile, Leigh. And it's a missile that's supposed to protect us from a nuclear attack.
Yeah.
Quite high stakes.
Yeah.
So far, every time they've tried it, not been successful. Jed scathing about this. Also, I'd just like to flag that we're 4 minutes and 56 seconds into this episode, and Jed he has mentioned New Hampshire.
And I think this is something that we should be keeping a running tally of moving
Let's
forward.
Take this forward.
I actually can't believe that it's taken us this long to come to the conclusion that this is something that we should be tracking.
Yeah. Jed is in no way interested by war games. He just wants to talk about trivia and read books. And frankly, I love him for that.
And I do wonder, is this a moment of subtle play on the film Deep Impact, which sounds like it should be a porno. It's not. It is about an asteroid hitting Earth. In fact, the film Deep Impact came out in 1998. So that is historically possible that it is influenced by that film.
Stunning.
Which, if anyone's got a kind of rogue lazy Sunday, I would highly recommend. You've got the likes of Morgan Freeman, Elijah Wood, John Favreau.
It's a star-studded affair.
We love a disaster film. Unfortunately, Leo is not in this episode as much as he might wish to be. I feel like in this episode, Leo wishes to be in the stakes of the film Deep Impact. He's rather in the presence of Lord John Marbury, which from his perspective, I suppose it could in fact be a disaster film. But unfortunately, he's kind of in a comedy this episode.
Yes. That is kind of what's happening. So he's surrounded by all of this like really high tech, like the sit room is kitted out right now. We've got like glass screens, we've got projections. Anyway, we have this countdown that the missile is supposed to hit its target. Alas, Leigh, we miss yet again. And Leo's like, oh, how far did we miss by? And the general's like, 137. And Leo's like, 137 feet? Jesus, that's bad. And then the general's like, no, 137 miles.
Crazy.
And then Jed's like, okay, let's get on with our day. And his sign off into the opening credits is just him turning to Leo and go, by the way, the words you're looking for are, oh, good grief.
Can I just say also before we move on, a moment for the kind of computer room soundscape that we have going on in the sit room in this episode. It's very nostalgic for me. It kind of is invoking dial-up. When there's just kind of like rogue computer noises happening.
The beeps and the boops, yeah.
It feels a little bit like we're on a Star Trek craft. It's very exciting.
Do you know what? Like back in the year 2000, like we're pre-iPod at this point, right?
Crazy.
Like I'm moseying around with my Walkman right now. And like, what a simpler time. To a press briefing with CJ and confirmation that we're in for an ambassador-heavy ep. So this kind of is our like through-line story.
I needed a reprieve. I'm still so like shaken by Noelle.
Yeah. It's going to take us some time to get over that episode. But what she's talking about is the fact that the role for British ambassador is still up in the air because like several people have been offered it and not been able to take it. So
3 guesses for who it might be.
The heavy foreshadowing in the previously on. I feel very anxious that currently my country's only representation on this show is Lord John Marbury and Bernard.
Yes. I mean, I will say, Fiona, at least you're not Ukrainian.
This is true. They've had a rough ride so far.
Rough.
But okay, I will get into this later when Lord John arrives because I have things to say, Leigh.
Yeah.
Anywho, CJ is very miffed, let's say is the word, because she has learnt lots of pop facts and isn't being asked about them.
She didn't get to show off her full prep, which I feel is very you and I coded. It's like, why have I expended energy learning all of these things if I didn't get to show it off?
Yeah, like, please, could we just set aside some time for me to tell you all of the things that I've learned and hyperfixated on, please?
It's very earth sign. If CJ is not revealed to be a Taurus, Capricorn, or Virgo, I'm going to eat my hat.
Again, a strongly worded letter to Aaron Sorkin.
She is. It is a hill that I will die on, that she is an earth sign.
I love when she just shouts at the press corps, guys, you know I study these things just for you. And a little fashion moment for Carol. Carol is wearing a killer black trouser suit.
Love it. Yes.
Which I honestly think would have been hard to find at the time fashion-wise. Yes. So therefore it does deserve a mention.
Absolutely, yes. Fully. Ahead of her time fashion-wise.
Yes. It's time for some plot. Sam Seaborn is announcing CARE, which is the Clean Air Rehabilitation Effort.
Because Sam Seaborn loves the earth almost as much as he loves dental hygiene.
Your teeth are the best friends you got, CJ. You take care of them, they'll take care of you. So Sam is running a meeting and is being very Sam. Mm-hmm. He is in full flow. Like, he is just reciting a speech to Bonnie and Ginger.
Who look very hard done by.
They've been there for a while, you can tell.
When Toby is away, Sam will play.
That it's never been clearer that Toby's off, like, doing work elsewhere. Is global warming a real environmental condition or merely a temporary anomaly? Is it a global threat or the exaggerated claim of alarmists? The time for such debate is over. I wish it was, Sam. I truly wish it was, but it's 2024 and this shit's still going on. With people saying it doesn't exist.
In fact, it may be 2025 by the time this episode comes out.
In which case, I'm even more upset. Toby is away. I can't remember. Is it Kansas? He's away. Who knows? We're waiting for him to return.
He's busy being a grumpy man on a plane once more.
Will he ever get his packet of peanuts? We'll never know. Bonnie and Ginger, whilst looking very done, also look phenomenal.
They do, as always, yes.
They're such a dynamic duo. I think something that I'm coming to really appreciate, particularly with the EAs that work for Toby and Sam, is how, despite the fact that they're coming in like for little scenes here and there, or little transition moments, they play the relationships so clearly. It is so clear that they're like, we've been here all day, and like Sam is being so much like, I don't know, the way they put up with him is so funny, and the way that they like handle Toby is so funny. Like, it feels really well grounded and researched. And I'd just like to say, well done, gals. We see your work.
I can physically feel off of them that they, like, with every fiber of their beings, cannot wait for Toby to be back.
Like, Sam turning to them and being like, don't you want to write this down? Is very intense. And Ginger's like, no, I think we got it.
This did cause quite a visceral flashback of actually from the day before your wedding, Fi, when you were giving me instructions about the orders of speeches, which I was emceeing, at which point you did actually say to me, don't you want to be writing this down?
I feel very attacked. I was in a very vulnerable place in my life. And I just wish to say that anything at that time, I was in too heightened of an emotional state to really stand by as an official comment. So,
to be fair, if that's as bad as you got on the day before your DIY wedding, I think that's probably pretty fair.
This is true. I mean, I think that I had great decorum and grace, and that there was minimal meltdowns, and I surrounded myself purposefully with people who could call me on my shit, such as you.
I will just say, if any kind of 2025 brides are listening, I know that the cost of hiring China for your wedding feels insane. And like, maybe perhaps what you should do is, go out and source individual pieces of China yourself. But what I will say is, having been an observer on that process, finding the individual pieces of China car boot sales and charity shops over the course of the year leading up to your wedding is not going to potentially be worth it.
I would just say either elope or throw huge amounts of money at the problem. That's it. I think my feedback from getting wed is either money is no object and just keep spending, or just don't spend anything, elope with your partner, and then have like a nice dinner with friends. Honestly, the process has aged me irreparably.
But it was a gorgeous day. It was a gorgeous day.
Wasn't it a beautiful day? And obviously, I'm very happy. I am. That was actually not. That was me being true. It's everything. I sound sarcastic. I've drunk a lot of caffeine today. Anywho, we do feel, getting back to the plot of this episode, that Sam has been allowed to be let loose without Toby. So when Toby arrives, obviously grumpy, having been on a flight, we know he hates to fly, and is upset because he says that Sam should have called and checked before launching an initiative on behalf of the government.
That does feel crazy.
It does.
It feels crazy from Sam, but it also feels like exactly the kind of like overreach that a hugely successful, intelligent, but yet junior member of male staff would make.
And I think the way that Sam thought it was going to go is that Toby was going to be like, wow, I'm really proud of you.
Wow, you've had the foresight that I could not. And therefore, I welcome you, your fresh generation, up into leadership. Maybe I should just quit and allow you to take over my job, because clearly you have the vision that I lack.
Sam, may I start calling you son? I'm proud of you. Papa's proud of you. Who will be the new British ambassador, Leigh? Josh and CJ are on the phone talking about who it might be, and Donna opens the door into Josh's face. Very entertaining, very enjoyable. We love a physical comedy moment.
We love.
The reason that Josh is leant against the wall is part of an exercise to help him process his anxiety.
Which actually makes a huge amount of sense, kind of grounding in physical activity.
Yeah. Then Donna brings up Lord John Marbury. Obviously, heavy foreshadowing yet again. She then is like, oh, he's so handsome. Now, no disrespect to the actor who plays Lord John Marbury, does an excellent job. But I wouldn't say he's like fit. Do you know what I mean? And like, by this point in time, we had given the world Colin Firth as Mr. Darcy. So don't turn around and tell me that Lord John is what we're calling British handsome. Do you know what I mean?
But then how else will Josh be jealous?
For God's sake. Are you threatened by his brilliance? You seem threatened by his brilliance.
Neither Leo or I are threatened by his brains, his looks, or his charm. He is, however, a lunatic Brit, and we are grateful there's an ocean between us.
I mean, preach.
I'm
going to
start calling you a lunatic Brit.
I would love that. I really would. I think the phrase, I'm grateful there's an ocean between us, is absolutely gorgeous.
Stunning, beautiful, yes. Bradley Whitford, upon learning that Lord John Marbury is going to be the new British ambassador, his physical performance upon that news is truly masterful. It's kind of like half gag, half sigh, half belch, really taking me on a journey through that exhale. Hugely impressive.
It's so funny. Like you can see the reflux in the moment. And then as she exits, she says, Josh, he's dreamy. Is he, Donna? Is Lord John Marbury dreamy?
This subplot is going to a crazy place, but we'll discuss.
Back to the environmental lobby. Jed has been asked to do a speech at this dinner thing for the environmental lobby.
Yes.
Which he's been brought into last minute because someone else cancelled. And we're using this as our platform to announce CARE, Sam's big plan.
Gorge.
So there's lots of like bits of drama offshooting from this environmental lobby speech that Jed's going to make. Just popping back to Josh Lyman for a second. Let's talk about his suit.
He's in an especially nice kind of like dark brown suit in this episode. And I just think it fits him especially nicely. It feels like he's had a little bit of a touch of a makeover. He's looking very put together.
I actually think a brown suit on a man is one of the most flattering colours.
I agree.
I feel like in season 1, we were in an oversized era.
Yes,
with
very
Josh.
90s, yeah.
And this is like, you know, the guy's got a nice figure.
Yeah.
It's showing off, you know, his broad shoulders.
Yeah.
In the way that the plaid shirts really did.
Yeah, fully.
So Leigh, I need you to explain something to me as someone with a knowledge of America.
Yes.
Like, why are we so stressed about the environmental lobby?
So I think it's fascinating that basically the government has absolutely, especially as represented in this episode, has absolutely no issue with being like completely beholden to the gun lobby. But there's something about the environmental lobby that they're like, oh no, it's going to make us look like weak if we're like the environmental lobby's bitch. Now, obviously, like all different types of causes, depending on how much money they have at their disposal, are totally capable of like an impact on politics through money, you know, and how much money they're willing to give to a particular candidate or not, depending on, you know, how supportive of their cause that candidate might be. But there is, and I don't understand this hugely about the American kind of political psyche, but there is just this absolute fear of being seen to answer to environmentalists.
Yeah.
In a way that they're just not scared of with other issues in the same way.
Not in the same way.
And
it's
I
really
wonder
interesting
if it all comes back, as many things in American politics do, to just like the great fear of the evils of socialism.
Truly.
In that Americans just don't like being told what to do. And listen, you know, Ireland has also lived under British rule. Okay, like we get it. We get wanting to throw off our colonial rulers. Totally understand.
Sorry about that.
Absolutely. Apology accepted, Fiona. But like I get it. But there's this whole thing about like freedom in America that feels huge. Whereas I do feel like in Ireland, we're like much happier to be like, okay, for the collective good of everyone, if we all kind of agree to this social contract of doing these things, it'll be better for everyone. And I don't know what that cultural difference is.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I wish we'd got into that a bit more in this episode, but there's just too many hijinks happening. One such like kind of skit that's happening is at this dinner, the lobby has asked someone to host who either didn't laugh at one of Jed's jokes or Jed didn't laugh at one of his jokes. But at this point in the episode, we don't know and everyone is worried.
Yes.
But back to Leo and his little rocket. Just fact that Toby Ziegler is equally uninterested in the big missile. And he's kind of chatting to Leo. And then Leo says, there's a limit to the number of rooms I can be in at once. And he looks really stressed. And I just kind of, it finally sunk in for me that whilst we've been making all these jokes about how like Jed doesn't seem to be doing anything and like is just like joking around with Charlie, it really like put into clarity for me that how much of the president's time is taken up with ceremonial things that are really time consuming, like dinners and like this process with the ambassadors, which Jed is doing all day. And that just means that Leo is having to like field everything else.
Yes.
It's just, his workload is huge.
And that's why people in the chief of staff role burn out really quickly. I think one of the most like unrealistic, generally accepted to be like unrealistic things about the West Wing is that it's kind of one chief of staff.
The whole time.
You know, because oftentimes I think people kind of last like a year, 2 years in that role because it's just so huge. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like Leo's looking at burnout at this point in this episode.
Yeah, staring down the barrel of.
So Toby's come to Leo. He's like, we need to throw something back at the environmental lobby. We're giving them care and we're giving them like Jed on a platter.
Yeah.
So we should do a drop-in, which is, I found out from this episode, is basically like when you're doing a speech, you then just like drop in something that's like a bit contentious.
Yes.
And it's not something that's pre-approved. It's like on the quote unquote on the hoof. It's secret.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is a very fun terminology for political gameplay.
So fun.
And I really enjoy it. However, if it were me who was either doing the speech or receiving the speech, I would hate it.
I feel like this is something that Obama was especially good at. Just kind of like throw in a mic drop, head out.
Yeah, that's me done. Meanwhile, Sam Seaborn is just really thrilled by being able to be the main character in his little storyline with Care.
He's just so excited to be taking a lead on something.
He's like briefing CJ and her team before they announce Care. And he's like running the room, and CJ is just very over it. And like, he's like, asking questions, and people are like firing back other things. And C just raises her hand and she's like, did you manage to get girls to go out with you at high school?
Now, he just says yes and kind of like shoves her off. But a question to the room, Fiona, do we believe that Sam actually got girls to go out with him in high school? Or do we believe that since we've known him, he's actually been making up for lost time?
I think Sam Seaborn had a massive glow up in his 20s. Huge. I think he was at school. He was in drama club. I think he was in a lot of societies and groups. I think he had braces for the majority of high school. I don't think he was athletic. I speak as a kid who was not popular at school. And I think I speak to someone who was also in a particular, fun theatre kid group at your high school. But you can be very popular within your tribe.
Yes.
I don't think that was even that for Sam.
I feel like, what was the name of the woman he was engaged to in the flashback?
Lisa?
I think Lisa may have been his first girlfriend. Like they met on like the first day of freshman year of college.
Yes. I'm sold.
And he was like, I finally got a girl. I'm going to lock her down.
And do you know what? She did some work. She put some work in on Sam Seaborn. She got him a good haircut.
Yeah.
She helped him pick clothes.
And we thank her.
We thank her for her work.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people out there have built the other half of their relationship. There are people walking around who are the product of good girlfriends and boyfriends.
There are so many men on Hinge today who were built on the backs of their ex-girlfriends who they screwed over.
100%. 100%. Good God. And you know what? We have to invest to get rewards elsewhere. And often if we have been the girlfriend of someone that we've, made better, and then they've immediately dumped us and moved on to someone else, we get that paid back at some point, is what I believe.
In many ways, like in an academic work or writing where you have to like cite your sources.
Yeah, I would love for that to be present on dating apps. Yeah.
Especially heterosexual men should have like a list of citations that are like acknowledgements to Emily.
Thanks. Thanks and good wishes too. I am here because of the hard work of X, Y, and Z.
To Victoria for introducing me to skincare,
For Lucy for getting me out of workout clothes and into a fun, casual look.
Yeah.
I read something online the other day. It was someone saying, were you popular in high school or are you funny now?
Yeah.
And I can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
I felt very red for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think he got girls to go out with him in high school. And I just think that when he, hit 25, people were like, wow, Sam Seaborn's pretty hot, right?
Yeah.
Josh enters the room where this briefing is happening, looks to Sam and says, can I have her for a second? Sam goes, yeah. And then CJ just goes, why do you ask him and not me? And Josh's reply is, he looked in charge.
This really did something to my mental space. It was a stop and pause moment for me. Simultaneously, it was so enraged me on such a visceral level. And I'm so sorry that I'm so clearly speaking through my cold, listener here, through the mental fog of Benelin. But it was enraging. But then on the other hand, I was like, it actually feels like quite a nuanced depiction of something that feels extremely real. But at the same time, but thank you, Aaron Sorkin, for naming it. But at the same time, I'm so incredibly angry.
Yeah. For me, the real gag was, can I have her for a second? Because not only do I hate the use of her, when we know he means CJ, but also just because CJ is the only woman in the room.
Who's she? Like, the cat's mother?
Precisely.
Can we not just say her name? Why are we talking about her like she can't hear the conversation?
Let's continue in this vein because I'm sorry, is everyone high? Josh pulls CJ out of this meeting for a chat and she says, "My love for John Marbury is real. It's not a schoolgirl crush. Can I ask what is happening?" CJ's like, "He's eccentric." And she says it like it means he's hot. And this is, Leigh, this is exactly how ugly British men get hot women from other countries to like them. And it infuriates me. It infuriates me when I meet a gorgeous, beautiful, like excitable, like young American woman. And she's like, "Oh my God, my boyfriend is from the UK. He's from, this place." And then I meet the most like insufferable, dull, pedestrian man who actually is like a bit gross and like not very intelligent. And I'm like, how have you landed this gorgeous woman? Like, what is the phenomenon, Leigh? Because you had an Irish accent and you lived in America. Like, what, as a woman, is it different? Is it
I did men? Incredibly well for myself. And to this day, despite being gay, I am extremely popular with American men. What can I say? They love me.
You are.
Irish men, on the other hand, when I was back living in Dublin, it did not go well.
They want to bag an American.
They do.
Irish men want to bag an American.
They do. Or really, I mean, like if I think about like my cousins, like kind of social group of lads who I grew up socializing with, not one of them is with an Irish girl. They're all with kind of this just like absolute kind of who's who of Europe.
Just like it's like literally like a like an EU panel.
Yeah, literally
of gorgeous tall women.
Yeah, truly.
Just all of these 5'8", 5'9" Irish men.
Yeah.
Punching.
They are all punching.
Yeah.
No disrespect, lads. Not that any of you are listening, but
I think you're incredibly in love with your partners. Good for you, boys. And everyone seems like they're like very in love, and that's beautiful.
Yeah.
But also, it's such an interesting phenomena, and it
has to be said, like the English and Irish, I think as a universal, do better abroad.
Yeah. But mainly men. I mean, I personally, when I was in America, all I got was, "Are you Australian?" And then when I said no, they looked disappointed. So, and then obviously, like, I didn't do well when I went to Ireland because obviously I'm English. In fact, one of Leigh's cousins and one of his friends cornered me in a smoking area and called me a black and tan.
The aforementioned lads who now all have really hot wives.
I was like, "I'm sorry, I'm 19. I'm really stressed."
And then we watched, dear listener, the film The Wind That Shakes the Barley. And Fiona realised what she was being called.
I was like, oh God, this is so bad. Not just the history of Ireland, but just that social scenario that I've been put in as a 19-year-old woman on a night out.
I do apologise. That was very much on me, yes.
We've like gone hard into a deep cut here, Leigh, of just like mine and yours personal law. I don't hate it. We'll see what our running time is. Misha, you make the call on this one, girl. Okay, so back to the plot of this episode of The West Wing. So the host that we were wondering whether or not Jed laughed at the joke or they laughed at Jed's joke is a guy called Cornelius Sykes. First of all, amazing character name.
Obsessed.
They're like, CJ, can you go and talk to him because you know him? And then she's like, we're not friends. And I'm like, oh, did you date?
And it is never clarified.
It's never clarified, but it's giving. We will see each other and then it didn't come to anything.
I think because also he we'll talk about it when we get to the scene with him. Let's talk about it when we get to it. But
anyway, CJ is going on a road trip alone to New York to meet with Cornelius Sykes. And I'm beyond excited for NYC content.
Yeah, huge.
Then just a moment of conjecture for Donna continuing in her deranged vein for this episode where she's like, do you think John Marbury can introduce me to any low-level royals?
Now that I do see for Donna. I do see her as the type of American girl who's like, I want to marry into the British royalty.
That she's going to be watching the Hallmark film about Meghan Markle and Prince Harry and being like, yes, truly that should be my experience.
My tower is in ivory, dude.
Again, if you have, an afternoon and evening to yourself, would thoroughly recommend was it a Netflix original?
I believe it was a Hallmark film about the courtship of Meghan and Harry. Myself and Fiona passed a riotous time.
Yeah. Meanwhile, in the West Wing, Jed is still swearing in ambassadors. He is currently with the ambassador of Sweden.
And I will just say the teenage children of the Swedish ambassador, extremely well cast. I believed every second of it, down to the flicky bob.
Yeah, truly. I'm also obsessed with the concept of Jed providing trivia for a country to the ambassador of that country.
Agreed, yes.
If that's not neurodivergence, then I don't know what is.
Truly. Yeah.
Okay. So Leo is dropping the concept of the drop-in to Jed.
Yeah.
Cueing the most unbelievable line from Jed Bartlet. Leigh, please.
I'm a victim to my own purity of character.
To which Leo just responds, whatever.
And this, for me, really sums up the dynamic of their friendship.
Yes.
In a nutshell, if you will.
Which is why I know that Jed Bartlet is not an earth sign.
No.
There's also a running joke that I think is quite funny, which is people are talking about a lynx, the animal.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, I think it's a kind of possum. And it's just a moment for Jed Bartlet to be like, no, that is incorrect. Let me tell you about the lynx. He then continues to be insane because obviously he's worried about this environmental lobby dinner because 2,000 environmentalists are going to try and kill me tomorrow night. They're going to come at me with vegan food and pitchforks. To which Charlie responds, that doesn't really sound like something people do. And then Jed says, still, I'd like you to get between me and any boiled seaweed you see coming my way. And Leigh doesn't eat meat. I don't eat meat.
However, I do, as someone who dates women, I do appreciate the fear of people coming at you with vegan food and pitchforks.
Look, like no
it's
one
a
wants
real fear,
vegan food
for
to be like
sure.
forced, like a naughty's nut roast being thrust upon you. Understood.
Dense. It's going to be dense.
It's going to be dense. Like Linda McCartney's sausages kind of were really all we had in the year 2000.
Agreed.
Do you know what I mean? So I can understand his stress, but don't be bringing boiled seaweed. What do you think vegetarianism is, Jed? Boiled seaweed?
We get that you love steak and crab. We get it. We get that you hate green beans.
We get it. You don't like green beans and you just want a steak and a scotch. We get it. But we know what vegetables are. Okay. CJ is winning an award, which is why she's going to New York. And frankly, Leigh, there's just not enough fanfare about this.
Nobody cares that she's winning an award, and it personally offended me. I also really wanted the New York visit to be a Rosemary Clooney-esque moment from White Christmas when she leaves the production to go and do her kind of sad cabaret in the big city.
Yes. When you wrote this in the shared doc, Leigh, and I read it, I screamed like out loud because this is the best part of White Christmas, the movie.
Yeah.
When she does the set and she's wearing the black sequin dress, and she's fucking cinched.
Yeah.
Like within an inch of her, to the gods. And she looks at him in the eyes as she's singing about being heartbroken. And she's just like doing a gentle shimmy. My God.
It's the hottest a woman has ever
Mamma
looked.
Mia. Unbelievable. It's the hottest a woman has ever looked and the most dangerous. Do not cross Rosemary Clooney. Do not break her heart. Anyway, again, I'm scared, Leigh, that Sam Seaborn doesn't know about the drop-in.
Yes, I'm concerned. I'm concerned for sure.
He is passing draft 12 of his speech to Ginger, and I've just put in the doc, conjecture, Sam is in fact Meg Ryan in When Harry Met Sally, screaming and crying and saying, I'm difficult.
So real. So real.
When he hands Ginger this draft of his speech and she just says, whether or not it's the final draft is really up to you. Then Sam describes a standing ovation to Ginger and Bonnie. And they just sit there and very respectfully listen to him as he talks about like how one tries to move an audience with a speech.
Very much being like, I have written rhetoric that will raise the heartbeat, and therefore I am expecting a standing ovation.
Yeah, it should happen because I'm that good.
Yeah.
And frankly, maybe, Leigh, we should take more of that energy into our own lives.
Agreed.
Enter Lord John Marbury.
With the immortal line, your assistant Margaret is looking positively buxom.
Thank you. I'll tell her. Margaret from off screen. Thank you.
He also is coming in with his own aide, Caprice. Hey, Caprice.
I look forward to being better acquainted with Caprice. Also, Caprice. What a fantastic name.
She's also wearing a kind of peach ensemble. Love it.
Looking gorgeous. Now, I just would like to circle back to buxom, Leigh.
Yes.
How do we feel about buxom?
I feel that we don't get enough buxom in our sexual harassment these days.
No.
As much as I don't wish to bring sexual harassment back, I think if we're going to have sexual harassment, I would like it to be in a kind of quaint, buxom terminology.
Yeah, throw some of that out,
Yeah.
So one thing that I love about this scene is that it doesn't seem to matter whether he's an ambassador or not. Lord John Marbury will just call Leo Gerald forever. And then, like, having misnamed Leo and been, like, frankly quite rude to him, he turns to Josh Lyman, grabs Josh Lyman's hands in his own and goes, God bless you, Josh. 1 million people's prayers were answered. And this is...
With no context.
No context. Obviously, it's him being like, glad you're alive after the shooting. But like, it's so intense and like so wildly left field. But I kind of love it.
Yeah. What I will also ask is, because given that he is accompanied by Caprice, famously his aide, and there is no kind of family present, it leads me to ask, is Lord John Marbury a bachelor?
Yeah, no wife. No wife. Yet. Fun fact, though, that we do find out, which is that Lord John Marbury doesn't support the missile that Leo's kind of really gunning for continued work on, which kind of makes me respect him more.
I will say it feels that the anti-missile and kind of supporting of missile delineation between the male characters almost feels like, are we subscribing to kind of an older fashioned sense of masculinity or are we kind of the new wave?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Should we go to New York, New York?
New York. Yes, please.
So we're meeting Cornelius, who goes by Corey, which is fucking fabulous. I didn't know that Corey was like a abbreviation of Cornelius.
Yeah, the Corey-Cornelius combo just covers all manner of sins. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, incredible. So Corey arrives. He is fit.
Yes.
Super hot. He's also wearing a leather jacket because he's a comedian and it's the year 2000.
Now, I will say what this whole exchange with Cornelius over like whether or not the audience kind of was eating up his performance or not, as someone who spends quite a lot of time in kind of comedians' green rooms with heterosexual male comedians, was deeply triggering. And dear God, the thought of gigging for Jed and Abby is horrifying.
Like, it's not a fun, like, that's a tricky gig.
It's tough, for sure.
We're in like this incredibly beautiful, I guess, like hotel lobby.
Yeah.
And it's stunning. And Corey's there, and he's like this like gorgeous man, like laying back in his chair with his leather jacket on. And he gets CJ a drink. And in my head, Leigh, this is what I thought being an adult would look like. Like, I thought I would be having these drinks.
For sure, for sure. And I will say that I feel that they have hooked up.
Oh, yeah. I think they've dated.
Because they mention that he was kind of on the campaign trail for Jed, which makes me go like, it feels like a campaign on the road romance that just like didn't pan out because they're both so focused on their careers.
But it was just like a few dates, you know? Like
or
a few
maybe
dates
not
and a
even
bit of fun.
dates. Maybe it was just like...
Just a few hookups.
Yeah.
Very fun. But I feel like I'm sad I don't think we're going to meet Corey again.
No.
But, you know, I love that he's now part of CJ's law. Back to Marbury. When asked, what made you take the post? His response is, I don't know. I suppose it was possible I was drunk. Again, I would just love there to be some representation of my country that isn't this. But then also, like, he is a messy bitch, but he's got backbone. And actually, is that true representation of my country? Maybe it is.
Maybe it is.
Like, we're a bit messy, like, we're a bit problematic. But, you know, like, we'll stand up for what we believe in. Although a lot of what we believe in historically has been really bad. Okay, let's not dig too deep into that. Margaret is in a gorgeous outfit.
Yeah.
She's in a cream skirt suit.
Gorge.
Her red hair is popping. Then there is an unhinged moment where basically Jed is still tied up with other ambassadors. So you're going to have to wait your turn.
Yeah.
And they're like, you're going to have to wait an hour. And Marbury's like, an hour? I'll need some amusement. Cue Donna going, good evening, your lordship. And then Marbury just looking her up and down and going, excellent.
Yeah.
Is this supposed to be funny?
This is tough in a post-Me Too world.
Yeah.
I will say it would appear that Donna's having fun. She appears to be kind of consenting to the whole exchange.
Yeah.
But, I think we were very free with our flirtatious energy in the 90s and early noughts in the workplace. We were very, all you have to do is think about those MSN messages between Bridget Jones and Daniel Cleaver to know that it was a different world. It was a different time.
Yeah. We're going to flash back to CJ's date, maybe not date, with very sexy comedian Cornelius.
Yeah.
So what I found about this was really interesting. So Corey made a joke about the police. And being a black man.
Uh-huh.
And like the story was, it was spun that Jed didn't laugh at the joke. And I think it brings up this really interesting thing within the Democratic Party where like CJ was like, but we were courting law enforcement.
Yeah.
And Corey's like, yeah, but you also hired me because you were trying to court the black vote.
Yeah.
So like, what do you stand for? And it's a really interesting conversation. And like the beauty of it is that CJ's like doing her job as press secretary, trying to navigate this conversation.
Yeah.
But also you can see her personal life navigating this also with like her relationship and history with this guy.
It's basically the Hamilton Burr argument. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, what do you stand for? And the kind of the nub of this ended up being that because CJ span it that Bartlet didn't laugh at the joke, Corey was labeled a Hollywood sleaze.
Tough. Yeah.
And like, actually, that's really rough.
Yeah.
Their conversation gets cut short around this time because she's like, I've got to go.
Yeah.
And then like, he like looks at her, and the way that he looks at her, I'm like, something happened. Like they had something.
Yeah, for sure. Also a quick moment for the shushle, which I only know of from Nora Ephron's Heartburn. But I think if I could have like 3 historical experiences, I would love to take the Washington, New York shuttle flight in the 90s.
Yeah.
And just like kind of eavesdrop on people, you know?
The conversations that would be happening. Yeah. So we flip back to the environmental lobby event.
Yeah.
And Sam's speech. And Sam finally learning about the drop-in, like watching it in real time.
Yeah.
And watching his speech end, not the way he planned it.
Yeah.
And no one standing up and the applause being like quite forced. And that hurt me.
Because he doesn't even realize that other people were in on it. He like calls Toby and he thinks that it's going to be a surprise for Toby as well.
Yeah, because he's like, I think Jed went rogue.
Sweet, innocent summer child.
I felt that for him. And I really think, I know that like Toby cut him out of it because he's like, I don't have time to emotionally handle Sam.
Yeah.
But I think the fallout's worse with him not being cut into it.
Yeah.
But Leigh, must Lord Marbury chat up Donna?
There was an arm touch that I was deeply uncomfy with, I must say. It felt like a very loaded arm touch.
It's also, again, it's coming back to this like very average men picking up very beautiful American women, which is he's just telling her about like a general royal history.
He's walking her through like royal lineages.
And she's like, wow. It's very funny. It is very funny. CJ returns from New York in her outerwear.
And I will just say CJ's hat is adorable and so like retro, very Y2K. And the Gen Zers would absolutely eat that hat up.
They would eat that shit up. So Toby and Sam, like, it's tense because now Sam knows it's a drop-in and he's very upset. And Toby's like, wait, let me explain. And Sam just turns, like, is so close to his face and just says, get away from me. And then walks away. The drama, I'm thriving. I honestly...
Truly.
Rob Lowe turning around and being like, get away from me, was giving like Twilight levels of drama. And I was in, Leigh. I was in. I was Team Sam. Leigh put something very interesting in the shared doc about the kind of Marbury-Donna chemistry.
I was like, are we going to get the reverse of the President Billy Bob moment?
In Love Actually.
Yes.
Where like Donna was going to hook up with Lord John Marbury and then...
And there was a fire and he's the President of the United States.
And was Josh going to have his Hugh Grant moment where he actually realized what his feelings were?
Yeah. And he's like, David Beckham's right foot. David Beckham's left foot for that
matter. What a moment, what a reference. And will we ever recover from President Billy Bob? Will we ever recover?
I don't know that we will.
No.
In many ways, I think President Billy Bob gave us Trump. So let's move on.
Oh, no. So, something that happens in this scene between Lord John Marbury and Leo, I'll touch on very briefly, which is that Leo loses his mind because Lord John Marbury's like kind of like riffing with him, like they're having a little bit of back and forth. And then Leo's like, yeah, right before we opened a big can of whoop ass on you at Yorktown.
Okay, the phrase can of whoop ass is one of my least phrase. I can't. It makes me physically kind of go. But B, like at some point, the Americans are going to have to get over the Revolutionary War. I mean, they really must move on. I mean, it's like, I get it. You know, we kicked the English out of most of our country as well. But like, and it was a big day. Do you know what? It was a big day. But I feel we talk about it less.
Yeah. I enjoy that we are allowing John Marbury to express some actual politics because this is all going back to like this missile and kind of like nuclear prep. But then I feel like for that to be immediately undermined by Leo screaming about cans of whoop ass is crazy. Now, Leigh, I must take you to one of the most devastating scenes we've ever seen.
Oh my God, yeah.
So it feels like we're in like a kind of DC members club.
Yeah.
And Sam is like sat like having a beer by himself, being very upset. And Toby comes in and is like, basically like, is this seat taken?
Yeah.
And like orders himself a drink.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, so first of all, like don't ever try to go into the Oval Office mad.
Yeah.
Like, check yourself.
Yeah. Let's not do a Josh and Noel.
Yeah. We make lots of jokes about Toby being like a bit of a grump and grouch and like a bit of a like pissy bitch. But he is so fucking good at his job and he is such a good manager of people.
Yeah.
Like Sam Seaborn is so sad and so angry and upset in this moment. And Toby manages him phenomenally. And I think it is a stunning choice from the writers and also from like makeup and hair that like the way they have styled Rob Lowe in this scene, like his hair is like kind of ruffled and his eyes are red. Like it's a clear choice. Like Sam Seaborn's been crying.
And as was I, you know, I was crying with him. I must say, I was actually so emotional. Like, why was I so moved? And I think I was moved because of the power of friendship. Now, you and I both know of two very significant times in my life where I have had to go to another friend, kind of slightly with my tail between my legs. And those conversations are scary. And the scene invoked them for me. I was like, the power of friendship.
Exactly. And when Sam's like, you left me out, you think I'm the reason that you got beat on the leadership breakfast. And like the score kicks in and like he's got tears in his eyes.
Yeah.
It was too much for me. And Toby's just like really quietly listens. And then he's like, anyway, I have this beer. So I was just going to sit down and drink it. And we don't have to talk or anything.
Oh.
Men showing emotion. Why does it affect us so much? So we close out the episode with Jed being tired from actually a busy day.
A lot of small talk. So much. He has said so many facts about so many different countries today.
Yeah. However, he's saying how busy he's been to Josh and Leo, who both look fucking exhausted. And it's really funny. So it's time to swear in Lord John Marbury as the official ambass for the UK. And they're like, oh, sorry that you were like last in the queue. You got beat by Argentina. And I just want to say that, like, I don't know, is this like a Aaron Sorkin doing a kind of like Falklands War?
It does feel kind of potentially yes.
I don't know how it feels.
Uncomfy for sure. Uncomfy. Yeah.
But you know, hey, go for it. We swear in Marbury, and then Jed's like, oh, hey, John, what's your opinion on the missile shield? They have this like very interesting conversation about like what it is to like protect ourselves and like by making these decisions, what are we kicking into action in global politics?
Yeah.
And actually, I feel like it's really teeing up what I imagine must have been a lot of the kind of discussion around fear, the discussion of kind of WMDs at the time and like the fear around that in kind of global politics in the year 2000. And then Jed just like rounds it off by being like, it's a discussion for serious men.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm like, sure. Let's just keep half the population out of this one, Jed. We'll keep it. We shall leave it to the men. We will stay at home and raise the children.
CJ, if you could step out of the room.
Yeah. Anywho, it was just a very interesting end to the episode. Like, it feels like although we kind of are doing fun skits, I think there is like, we're seeding for the second half of the series, perhaps some more long running storylines about like politics that's going to be happening. And that's the end of the episode, Leigh.
Yes, ominous on the eve of the Iraq War, I would say. Ominous.
Yeah. And also just like the writers of this show really reading the vibe, I guess, of what politics were like in America. I loved that episode.
Had so much fun. Yeah.
So much fun. Shall we go to the quickfires?
Let's do it, best fashion.
I think you've got a clear winner for this one.
The wife of the ambassador for Thailand, I would say. Yes.
Yeah. I think honourable mention for me goes to all the EAs.
Yeah.
And the return of pale blue yet again into the colour scheme.
They never let us down. Do you know what I mean?
What could a British or Irish politician never get away with?
I'm gonna hand this back to you, Fi, because I think you've got the absolute correct answer here.
I think for me, it's admitting that they might have been drunk when they took a leadership position. Like, frankly, that's crazy. Like, I know Lord John Marbury is good friends with Jed, but like, I wouldn't say that.
No.
On our bingo card of guns, abortion, free speech, religion, like, I think, you know, missiles, nuclear defense kind of feels like we're up there. But I do feel very positively about us starting now a kind of like running tally of when Jed mentions New Hampshire.
Yeah, I feel really good about this.
And how many times he mentions New Hampshire every episode.
Yes.
Your best writerly moments?
Sharpen a pencil, would you?
Yes.
Just as a retort to anything.
100% unbelievable. I do think that Jed's fear of vegan food for me has to come through. Yes,
of course, yes.
2,000 environmentalists are going to try and kill me tomorrow night. They're going to come at me with vegan food and pitchforks.
That really doesn't sound like something people do.
Still, I'd like you to get between me and any boiled seaweed coming my way.
Again, when did Jed and Charlie become like a vaudeville act?
Yeah, it's very that, isn't it? Man, I feel like a man.
Your assistant Margaret is looking positively buxom.
Thank you. I think for me, it's got to be, what made you take the post? I don't know. I suppose it was possible I was drunk. Because only a man could say that. You know? And Leigh, what made you proudest to be an American?
Okay, well, golf's not a sport. It's fine, don't get me wrong, but let's not confuse it, you and I, with things that men do.
Yeah, I mean, that was so fun. I think Rogley, for me, mine was like the sign-off between Leo and Lord John Marbury at the end.
This was real.
Where Lord John Marbury goes, "God bless America." And Leo shakes his hand and says, "God bless the Queen."
Which actually feels like quite a big moment from Leo with somebody that he hates.
But also, I just think it's very camp and fun.
It's so fun, yes.
Hit me with some knowledge, girl.
In honor of Lord John Marbury, today we are going to be chatting about the special relationship.
Oh, the special relationship.
And more specifically, we are going to be chatting about the present day British ambassador to the United States, who, as a small spoiler, is a very fun lady. But we'll get to that in a moment. Now, obviously, the American Revolutionary War ends.
Start at the beginning.
In 1783, my own neurodivergent status is out for debate. And Great Britain recognizes U.S. independence. You
very big of us for the time.
Whenever I'm talking about Great Britain from now on, I'm simply going to say you. You established diplomatic relations with America in 1785, although the U.S. did actually break off diplomatic relations for 3 years when it declared war on the UK during the War of 1812. But it was just a minor blip.
Just needed to take some space. Just take some space.
Exactly. And you kind of became friends again in 1815. Now, obviously, due to kind of shared democratic practices, shared language, and in many ways shared ideals, you're kind of obvious allies for each other. And relations have been strengthened over the years by the World Wars, Korea, the Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, as well as kind of founding NATO together.
Yeah, that was a big thing for us,
Huge. Also, obviously, among the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. And also, famously, Clinton and the US had a big hand in brokering the Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland, which was also kind of a big moment for American-UK relations.
Yeah, that's when Clinton did his big tour, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, Simon Tisdale of The Guardian in 2019 wrote, "The story of the post-1945 special relationship is really the story of how successive British politicians and diplomats have tried, with mixed success, to guide, cajole and manipulate US leaders from a position of ever-increasing weakness. On the American side, it is a story of hard-headed exploitation of US advantage, rendered more palatable by spurious expressions of undying amity. Window dressing aside, modern US presidents view Britain as a moderately useful client state, junior military partner, and gateway to Europe."
Wow.
Sometimes journalists for The Guardian really do just seem to be really enjoying themselves,
I think that's a very apt take, Leigh.
Yes.
I'd say, like, in the UK, The Guardian is very pleased with itself.
It's so pleased with itself. Yeah, it's so, yeah.
And hey, from time, sometimes that's what I want when I'm reading the news, is to go to a news source that's like just quite pleased with how, their take is kind of...
We're actually the liberal paper, I don't know if you know.
Yeah. Anyway, please continue.
So Professor Michael Howard actually wrote about wartime attitudes during World War II. I'm going to do it in what I imagine to be his voice. "It is never very easy for the British to understand that a very large number of Americans, if they think about us at all, do so with various degrees of dislike and contempt. In the 1940s, the Americans had some reason to regard the British as a lot of toffee-nosed bastards who oppressed half the world and had a sinister talent for getting other people to do their fighting for them." And I will just say that contemporary opinion polls supported his view.
That's very enjoyable.
Yeah. Now, like, Winston Churchill is kind of generally credited with kind of building the special relationship, if you will. He wrote after the war, "No lover ever studied every whim of his mistress as I did those of President Roosevelt."
Oh. Did Churchill, like, fuck Roosevelt?
It's a very confused kind of sentiment.
The analogy of like one country's being the other country's mistress, I don't enjoy. It feels very on brand for Churchill, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, it was a complicated relationship through World War II because, you know, the US was obviously supporting Britain before it entered the war. But at the same time, there was quite heavy conditions on that assistance. On December 7th, 1940, Churchill wrote to Roosevelt, "After the victory was won with our blood and sweat and civilization saved and the time gained for the United States to be fully armed, we should stand stripped to the bone. Such a course would not be in the moral or economic interests of either of our countries." When Roosevelt was responding, he never addressed this point. And as I'm sure from your kind of British education, you will be aware that the conditions of the 1941 Lend-Lease Agreement had really kind of stringent constraints, and the UK had to plead for concessions that enabled them to pay for Argentinian meat in order to be able to kind of keep British people from starving. Now, during this time, actually, the British agents, did not know this before, were sent to Manhattan to wave a covert mission of propaganda and disinformation to discredit American isolationists to try and get America involved in World War II sooner.
That's a really interesting fact. Like, I'd love to watch a film about that.
During this time, Montague Norman, the governor of the Bank of England, wrote, "I have never realized so strongly as now how entirely we are in the hands of our American friends over direct investment and how much it looks like as if, with kind words and feelings, they were going to extract these one after another." And Churchill's biographer, Roy Jenkins, actually wrote that Churchill was absent from Roosevelt's funeral in 1945, not because of duties of state, but because of a private bitterness about the slights Churchill believed America and Roosevelt personally had inflicted on the kind of obviously battered and bruised United Kingdom.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think it was quite painful for British people in the aftermath of World War II to see that the US was the only country that had really emerged from World War II having made like a cash profit off of it.
Yeah.
But Churchill's rhetoric on all of this kind of came to a culmination in 1946, after he'd been defeated in his next bid to be prime minister, when he made his Iron Curtain speech in Fulton, Missouri, where he called for a fraternal association of English-speaking people, a special relationship between the British Commonwealth and Empire and the United States. Now, this is seen as one of the opening acts of the Cold War.
Oh.
Because he's talking about a special relationship in the face of the spread of communism. But also, it is the first time the phrase "a special relationship" was used. So he's kind of credited as coining that term. But, successive UK governments kind of from then on were overly anxious about like maintaining US goodwill. It very much came to a head when the Korean War broke out in 1950 because the US was demanding military support in the Korean War. They wanted the UK to propose a rearmament program that would increase defense spending. Now, this is 1950, so Britain is still kind of like on its knees at this point, post World War II. They wanted to increase defense spending from 7 to 10%, but the US would offer financial aid only if that figure was raised to 14%.
Whoa.
The Labour government sought to meet that target, even though the promised aid never materialised. And when the Tories took back office in 1951, the rearmament programme was cut back to 10%. But that was still kind of an impossible burden for post-war Britain, really.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, we move to the 1960s. We've got Jack and Mac, JFK and Harold Macmillan, who got on really well personally. Kennedy kind of enjoyed boasting about his sexual exploits to Harold Macmillan and was really interested in the goss on the Profumo scandal. He really wanted to hear all about it from Harold. And they kind of succeeded in repairing some of the damage that was caused by the 1956 Suez Crisis when Anthony Eden was kind of humiliated by the US. So they got somewhere. But then obviously we lost JFK. And so then we get to Thatcher and Reagan, who, dare I say, Fiona, were obsessed with each other.
I took the words out of my mouth, Leigh. Like, what a toxic duo.
So toxic. The Regina George and Gretchen Wieners of their day. They have been described as ideological soulmates.
I find that as a phrase not fun. That's a scary phrase if someone's like, yeah, that's my ideological soulmate.
It feels like fascism immediately, doesn't it? Although Reagan actually kind of wasn't cool, obviously in many ways, but specifically against your people, in that he did invade the Caribbean island of Grenada, which was a member of the Commonwealth, without consulting Thatcher. Thatcher then called to berate Reagan about this over the phone. And apparently, according to history, he put his hand over the receiver and said, "Gee, isn't she marvelous?" as she's like screaming down the phone.
That tracks for him, doesn't it? It really does.
Thatcher, for her part, is quoted as saying that Ronald Reagan was, quote, "the second most important man in my life after her husband."
Wow. Wow. Also, I love that you, obviously the answer was her husband, but in my head, I thought she was going to say God.
Reagan's chief of staff actually said the pair had each other's backs and that their relationship was a love affair in the right sense of the word.
That is
I don't
just
know
a press
what that means.
nightmare to be like, how should we describe the relationship between these two politicians? I feel like the right phrase is love affair, but what we should say is in the right way afterwards, so it's clear they're not shagging.
Yeah. And then obviously they also disagreed over the Falklands War in 1982, when Reagan kind of wasn't that bothered about Britain keeping hold of an imperial outpost and called Thatcher to tell her so, telling her to halt her forces outside Port Stanley before they officially kind of defeated the Buenos Aires regime. And Thatcher rejected Reagan's demand, saying, "We have lost too many men, too many ships."
Yeah, famously. It's like a famous quote.
But unfortunately, the kind of bromance, if you will, between the UK and the US came to a crashing end because Bill Clinton and John Major just ideologically and personally just like very different people.
I just don't know what they would have talked about making small talk, you know. It's very much Jed at the state dinner, like being like, do you like salmon?
Exactly.
And he's like, that's all I've got. That's all I've got is, do you like salmon?
Sometimes you just don't get on, you know? Which brings us to kind of, I'm gonna end with obviously Tony Blair and George W. Bush, who bonded initially because they liked the same brand of toothpaste.
That's the dullest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And again, that tracks for me.
Yeah.
For George W. Bush.
Yeah. And kind of post 9/11, you know, their bromance kind of really ramped up. Blair was quite happy to kind of take on a subservient role to Bush. And Bush told reporters, "We've got no better friend in the world than Great Britain. We've got no better person that I like to talk to than Tony Blair."
It's such a, yeah.
Yeah.
You know when you're like, my childhood had like so many points of like note in my childhood are like watching the news at that time. And seeing those two faces and hearing those two voices. And it just feels like that was a million years ago. And
Truly.
actually in terms of like politics, it's actually not that long ago.
No. And what I did find interesting is that Tony Blair actually expected support from the US in pushing Israel to settle with Palestine in return for Britain joining the invasion of Iraq in 2003, and was shocked when that didn't happen. Historian Max Hastings is quoted as saying, "One of Blair's closest associates a few months after the war expressed frustration that in a range of bilateral negotiations, little or no progress was being made. We've stuck our necks out a long way for the Americans," he said in my hearing, "and it seems tough that we get no payback."
Yeah. I mean, I'm imagining that you might have some information on this now when you talk about the current ambassador, but I just feel like we're not as close. We're not as close like the US and the UK now. Like there's been a disconnect there for some time.
Yeah, I think also it did kind of continue with Obama in that Obama and David Cameron didn't really have a great connection.
What would they have talked about?
What would anyone connect with David Cameron over? Do you know what I mean?
Like, imagine like Obama being like tying his tie with Michelle, like before they're going to go to a state dinner, being like, what the hell am I going to talk to this guy about?
Truly. And I blame him for that in no way. And I think he was also kind of interested in the US's closest European ally kind of being Germany, which, Angela, it makes sense. But that brings us to the present day. In a profile in The Atlantic by Elaine Godfrey, the current UK ambassador is described, the guardian of the special relationship, the historical but possibly mythical bond between the United States and the United Kingdom, is a short woman with discerning blue eyes and a penchant for glittery headbands. Over the past 3 years, Pierce has become well known for throwing lively and well-attended Pimm's-fueled bashes, especially in the DC social season surrounding the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner. Underneath the surface of frippery, though, Pierce is a serious operator. The true art of her diplomacy is the very English thing of working hard to make it all look totally effortless.
Okay, I've got lots of feelings. The first is actually maybe Lord John Marbury is a perfect depiction of what a UK ambassador is. Pimm's fueled bashes.
Obsessed.
Also, sparkly headbands.
Oh, we're going to get to the fashion some more in a moment. Need I say, I am obsessed with this woman. Obsessed with this woman. Her name is Dame Karen Pierce.
She's a dame.
Lady
Lovely.
Roxburgh. And she told a Washington gathering in April when Rishi Sunak was trying to replace her that she would have to be dragged out of here by my fingernails.
I appreciate that from her.
She is Britain's first ever female ambassador to the United States.
Okay. Good for her.
She is 64 and has worked with the UK's Foreign Office for 43 years.
Whoa.
She has held positions in Japan, the Ukraine, in the Balkans during the conflicts in the former Yugoslavia. She lived in Kabul for a year as ambassador to Afghanistan and represented the UK at the United Nations for 3 years. She was made a dame in 2018, but is from a working class background, which actually makes her like a real outsider in the Foreign Service. One of her first jobs was she was private secretary to the British ambassador in the United States from 1992 to 1995.
Very interesting.
Yeah, she's held so many interesting jobs. It's like almost,
what a CV.
It's almost too much to go into in a way. And she was immediately before she became the UK ambassador, she was the permanent representative to the United Nations in New York. And part of her mission is to present Britain's firmly pro-Ukraine position on military aid. She's kind of able to wheel and deal, whereas obviously the Biden administration's matching desire to kind of provide aid to Ukraine often gets kind of stuck in Congress because it gets held up by kind of pro-Trump Republicans. But Pierce lobbied on Capitol Hill ahead of May's vote on Ukraine aid. And she traveled with the Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, to Mar-a-Lago to get buy-in from Trump on it.
Wow.
Yeah, so she's like a real player.
I would love to be a fly on the wall in that meeting.
Fascinating. I mean, she's been very diplomatic, unsurprisingly, about it and has not said anything about the meeting with Trump. But his position on the package was notably toned down after that meeting, which helped the aid package to pass.
And so was she the ambassador during Trump's last term?
No.
Okay, so that's going to be really interesting to see how that relationship plays out.
Yes, because Rishi Sunak failed to replace her. And Keir Starmer has now asked her to stay on in the role. So she's going to stay on when Trump comes in Jan.
Okay.
And she got to stay on because the Labour Party objected to naming a new envoy so close to the general election when Keir Starmer was elected.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, it's a really important role and like not something that you want to hurry. Like, referencing back to like kind of what can happen in lame duck periods. You know what I mean? Like when really big decisions are made, it can feel like quite a stressful environment for that to happen in.
A quote from Karen, that I think really kind of sums up her energy when she was asked about this, about whether she was going to be staying on or not. She said, "The Foreign Office is very boring about two things and two things only. One is that it does not reveal the contents of diplomatic conversations, and we don't comment on future appointments."
Ooh.
Love her.
Yeah.
In the same kind of profile on her in The Atlantic, she was again described as, despite being shorter than everyone else at the party, she still commanded the attention of all the people in her vicinity. Pierce has worn tangerine suits to state events and baby pink silk dresses with huge round sunglasses. Once, to attend a UN summit, she wrapped herself in what looked like a maroon feather boa. Such displays aren't just a sartorial choice, they're a strategy. And then this is Karen Pierce being quoted, "When you're an ambassador, you want people to remember you." About the feather boa, it wasn't one. It was a fur, but it was fake, Pierce insisted. Though the Russians tried to say it was an exotic fur. She rolled her eyes. The Russians will go for anything. They really have no scruples whatsoever. She doesn't feel real, and yet she is.
It feels like someone was doing an improv and it's just got really out of hand.
Truly. And obviously, like, entertaining is like a big part of being an ambassador. But she really doesn't like them being called parties. She's quoted as saying,
she prefers them being Pimm's fueled bashes.
The Pimm's fueled bashes. She doesn't like them being called parties because we would call them receptions because we treat them as work events. When asked about her drink of choice, she said, "I like lots and lots of cocktails, but the more pink they are, I'm afraid, the better."
I love this woman. Also, like, I love that she's like, it's a reception. Like, parties aren't, work parties aren't real parties. They're for working. If anyone out there has ever been to a UK work Christmas party, they will know that is not true. They are the absolute pits of human interaction. Mistakes are made. People's lives rise and fall on the night of the Christmas party.
Truly. She also threw some shade at Liz Truss. When she was asked about Liz Truss, she responded, "She's a private individual and she's welcome to pursue her politics. It's not where the British government is." Wow.
Very diplomatic of her.
She doesn't really discuss politics. Famously, she has to be diplomatic. And that does kind of make sense because her predecessor resigned from his position after it was leaked that he'd criticized the Trump administration as inept and insecure.
I mean, I agree with his opinion, but I also am aware that he shouldn't have made that comment.
No, it doesn't really put you in a very strong diplomatic negotiating position, does it?
No, not really, no.
When she talked about, that period where Britain had like a zillion prime ministers in the space of like a week.
Oh, yeah. I remember Leah. I remember it well. I'll never forget.
She did comment on that by saying, "There was a little bit of a wry smile on the faces of some American politicians when we had that quick turnover of prime ministers, because it's not what you think of when you think of British politics. On the contrary, you think of something solid that doesn't change very much over the years. But we're through all that."
That's very kind of her.
Now, she is considered to be like an excellent choice to stay on from January onwards because she has a really deep knowledge of the Republican Party and is kind of considered to be the best person to help guide the Labour government in kind of dealing with the Trump administration. And when Trump was elected, she tweeted, "We look forward to deepening our already profound and successful partnership as we deal with the challenges of the 21st century."
Very good. Very good.
And she also said, which I thought was a lovely uplifting note for us to end on in these dark, dark winter days, by saying, "I personally do not worry about America. I have a lot of faith in American democracy and in Americans, and I think you have very strong institutions."
Yes. Does that make you feel proud to be an American, Leigh?
It makes me feel extremely proud to be an American. And it also makes me extremely happy that people like Karen are in Washington.
Definitely. I loved that. That was very fun. Thank you.
Do you feel special?
I think I'm going to start referring to more relationships in my life as special relationships.
Yeah.
It's a fun and weird and intense phrase, and I'd like to use it more often.
Truly.
I feel excitedly about us coming back next week and doing the next episode because I think we're like on the precipice of some really big stories.
Yes.
And
agreed.
I think we're teeing up lots of different characters to be like in real moments of kind of like change. Because Leigh, we're officially mid-season now.
Wow.
Yeah.
How far we've come.
I know. So I'm going to say, let's do this next week.
Sounds like a plan. We are at Queer Girls Watch, wherever you get your socials. We're queergirlswatch@gmail.com. And truly, we love hearing from you. Also, I have set up a Discord on our Patreon, which includes such fun chats as Gilmore Girls moments, where Wingnuts and Gilmore Girls fans can have a crossover chat. There's also like a spoilers chat that me and Fiona are not going to look at so that you guys can discuss how right or wrong our predictions might be. And there's kind of a current episode chat as well. So if you're interested in that, please do go over to our Patreon and you can kind of join the chat. The people in there are lovely and it's just like really fun and vibey.
Yes. And yeah, until then, Leigh, fancy coming over to mine, putting on a little sparkly headband and having a Pimm's Fueled Bash?
I would love to have a Pimm's Fueled Bash with you.
Okay, it's a date.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.